Hey world, Dan Brown here, fighting off a cold. I've taken some Benadryl and some Sudafed, so I'm in a really weird headspace where I'm drowsy but also wired. So hopefully the center holds and I can get this whole video filmed in one take without sneezing and blowing my nose too much. But anyway, this right here could very well be the last thing that most of us, all of us, potentially see because of climate change. Obviously, climate change by itself does not cause nuclear explosions, but I've said it before on PogoBat. I'm going to continue saying it video after video because it bears repeating. Here's how it's gonna go if we don't deal with climate change. And even if we do deal with it, to some extent, this is already inevitable because we've kicked the can down the road far too far to deal with it in time. Sea levels are gonna rise, right? Coastlines are gonna shrink, deserts are going to expand, and people are going to be displaced on a scale larger than anything we've ever seen in human history. The largest migration crisis in history is going to cause political turmoil, and Earth is still a nuclear powder keg, and as there start to be more wars, more conflicts, this becomes much, much more likely. It's hard to predict exactly how it's going to shake out. You know, it's hard to predict step 3 when we're only on step 0, but ultimately, this could be the last thing that all of us see if we don't deal with climate change. We have run out of runway. We have kicked the can down the road for far too long, and if we're going to save any amount of humanity, we have to act right now, okay? We have to act now to mitigate the cascading crises of climate change. And we actually have an opportunity in the form of a midterm election in the United States of America to slingshot our culture to something close to the amount of attention that we would need to be at to take the big, bold steps that need to be taken to rein in climate change. Election day is Tuesday, November 6th. Election day is Tuesday, November 6th. Election day. Coming up just 2 Tuesdays from now, maybe 1 Tuesday if you're watching this a few days after it comes out, right? Right-wing trolls, Russian trolls are going to try to bring up all sorts of things to, you know, plant seeds of doubt in your mind to suppress turnout among left-leaning voters, and that's going to be in the comment section on this video. It's going to be all around the internet. Their favorite thing I've noticed is bringing up Bernie Sanders. I love Bernie Sanders. I very well might support him as soon as the 2020 election campaign begins in earnest. But what they love to do is bring up these divisive issues for left-leaning voters, right? Bernie Sanders was robbed is what they'll say, the implication being that the Democratic Party is just as bad as the Republican Party and that you should punish both by either not showing up to vote at all or by voting for Mickey Mouse, right? The Democratic Party does need a reckoning, okay? We need a reckoning in the Democratic Party. We need to see more successes like the variety brought to us by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez challenging centrist incumbents with very strongly left-leaning Democratic Socialists of America endorsed candidates to their left. We understand that. We feel that on a visceral level, but that is step 2, okay? Step 2 is challenging Democratic incumbents from the left. Step 1 is just, let's stop the hemorrhaging. Let's make sure that we send a resounding message to the Republican leaders of all 3 branches of the United States government right now. We need to tell them, the leaders that is, that we are wise to their rigging of our entire economic system. We are wise to their looting of young people's futures. I mean, they don't care. They're willing to trade in our right to life 20, 30 years from now in exchange for their ability to still be rich and powerful, at least for the next 5 to 10 years, okay? We need to tell them with a unified voice that this is the beginning of the end of their stranglehold on our government. And I want to be clear, that is a message for Republican leaders, not for Republican voters. I want to extend an olive branch to Republican voters because ultimately we will all be affected by climate change if we don't band together. If you don't band together with us on this issue now, 20 years from now, once the cascading crises have, you know, started to cascade at a quicker and quicker clip, you're going to wish that you weren't so late to the party, okay? If any Republican voters happen to be watching this, I don't mean to say this in a way that makes you think you're supposed to feel stupid. Like, I'm not saying you're stupid, but I am saying that you need to realize you're being taken advantage of. Right? The Republican leadership is shoveling money to themselves, to their rich friends, to their families. They're taking that from your livelihood. They're taking that from your future. And 30 years from now, like, if we don't do anything about climate change, you're going to be just as dead as the libs you've been owning. I understand. It's probably fun to own libs like me. I understand. We're very passionate, and it's very easy to, trigger some sort of a reaction out of us. That could be satisfying in the short term. But is dying in 30 years worth it? Is it worth it just to own the libs right now? I don't think so. Like, let's hang out. Let's vote together. Okay, let's start taking action. You don't have to agree with me on economic policy. You don't have to agree with me on a whole bunch of social issues. But can you at least agree with me that we don't want to die from climate change? Can we work together to try to make sure that doesn't happen? This issue will unite us all. It's inevitable. Eventually, people are going to start to realize. But it's already too late to stop it entirely. And so if you wait another 10 years to come around, that's too long. We're donezo at that point. Okay, anyway, more important than shaving away a few voters from the Republican leadership, who might be accurately described as a suicide cult on the issue of climate change. More important than that, in the immediate term, is making sure that those of us who are already awake to the seriousness of this crisis show up and vote on Tuesday, November 6th. Vote on Tuesday, November 6th. Last time we lost due to this combination, right? Democrats were disheartened, or I should say the left was disheartened that the Democratic Party is imperfect. It's not perfect. We were successfully goaded into sitting on our hands or casting protest votes for Mickey Mouse or Jill Stein because right-wing and Russian trolls reminded us constantly that Bernie Sanders was robbed. Okay, like that may be true, but instead of making progress through our protest vote, through our apathy, we took a big old step as a country towards fascism. And that's not even remotely close to what anyone remotely close to the left wants to see happening. You must vote on November 6th. Your friends must vote on November 6th. If you don't know what your polling place is yet, if you don't have a plan as to how you're going to get to your polling place, if you don't know what time of day you are going to vote, you need to stop everything you're doing. You need to pause this video. I don't even care if you come back. You need to figure that out right now, okay? And you need to reach out to your friends too. Make a party of it. Make it a social thing. Go vote with your friends, okay, if you have the same polling place. And if not, just make sure that they know where theirs is. You have to understand, though, Election Day is not the finish line, okay? It's the starting line, okay? That is the day that we begin asserting control of our future. We have to maintain our momentum straight through Election Day and not slow down, not break stride until, 2020 and beyond, okay? This is a foot race. We're going to keep that foot race metaphor going in a minute. In my video, Scruples, from a couple weeks ago, I mentioned that political optics, right, the way that the public at large thinks about the political situation, it has become an incredibly short-term game. Big stories a year before Election Day or a month before Election, even a couple weeks before Election Day, have faded from public consciousness by the time Election Day actually rolls around in our hyper-fast media environment. So, sometimes I use that as a framing device for how, right-wing trolls can leverage that dynamic to their advantage. But here, I actually want to argue that it's a positive, okay? Even if you haven't done anything to contribute to the blue wave, as it were, if you haven't knocked on any doors, if you haven't donated anything, if you haven't phone banked at all, that's okay, because the most important days of the campaign are right now, the immediate run-up to Election Day. If you can connect with people in this immediate run-up, then that's what we need to be able to shock the world, slingshot the world to attention. And yeah, sticking with the race metaphor as advertised earlier, if Election Day is the starting line, I think that, metaphorically, we should take about 1,000 feet, step backwards about 1,000 feet, and imagine that starting gun firing right now. Let's get a running start, okay? By the time Election Day rolls around, let's be going as fast as we can be. If you haven't volunteered yet, you are who we need to shock the world. If you belong to a demographic group that pollsters expect not to show up and vote, expect not to volunteer their time, then if you actually do those things, if you phone bank, if you knock on doors, if you canvass, if you donate to campaigns, then, you know, we're going to overperform. The left is going to do better than the polls indicate if we turn this next week and a half into a moment, right? You know, look at your calendar, pull up your calendar, pull out your planner, find a day between now and Tuesday, November 6th, and write it down right now. Make a commitment, mental and like literal, like plug it in. When are you going to phone bank? I've included links in the description of this video to Vote Save America and SwingLeft. Vote Save America has a Take Action tab with a lot of, it make it really easy. You're just a couple clicks away from finding either something you can do remotely from your desk or something within a couple miles of you that can help some congressional race or Senate race that you live close to that happens to be close. SwingLeft has a phone banking tool. If you don't want to leave your house, as I know many young people don't, this is a way that you can make a serious difference without donating any money, just donating your time. So look at your calendar, find a day when you would have, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours to dedicate to calling people in swing states. And, you know, you can be part of the movement, part of the moment that we have in these last few days before Election Day that will lead to a disproportionate leftward turn in the electorate. Like, I understand it's not easy to just like up and do something that you've never done before. That goes for voting and that goes for volunteering about voting. But once you begin, once you start doing it, once you've done something once, it becomes easier to do it a second time. The second time doing something is about half as hard as the first time doing it right. So if we begin taking action, if we turn these next 10 days into a groundswell moment that we can carry straight through Election Day and all the way to 2020, that's how we shock the world to attention. Please, help, okay? Our lives depend on it. Like, I'm not being dramatic. Like, actually, our lives depend on it. Inertia is a property of human nature. I understand most people watching probably haven't done any of the things I've been asking you to do in the last couple of minutes. And the right-wing trolls and Russian trolls understand that inertia is a property of human nature. So they're going to try to give you a mental out. Okay, they're going to continue trying to divide people on the left. They're going to try to act like the run-up to this midterm election is a primary campaign for the left, where we should be, you know, hashing out the specific differences of how exactly we should be oriented as the left half of the political spectrum. But honestly, it's not the time for that. Right now is just a time for establishing a bulwark against fascism. We need to be the big tent. We need to band together with more centrist-minded folks right now. Step 2 is going to be between 2018 and 2020, after this midterm election. That's when we need to start thinking about challenging centrist Democrats from the left in congressional races, Senate races, and, you know, beyond. But don't fall for the right-wing and Russian trolls trying to divide us right now. Don't let them plant a seed in your mind that makes it easy to just say, well, maybe both parties are bad, so I'll just stay home on Election Day. We can't do that. We will die if you do that. Not immediately. Like, we all understand that neither party is where it needs to be, and challenging incumbents Ocasio-Cortez style is something I'm really, really excited to lend a hand towards organizing. I want to be a part of that movement after this midterm election. But right now, we just have to stop the hemorrhaging. Okay, we have to stop our slip and slide adventure into fascism in the United States of America. And to do that, vote Democrat on November 6th. Dan Brown,